I also have treatments for patients who are not candidates for sophisticated dentistry, and I've helped a lot of people that other people would just turn away because they couldn't pay their entire fee right up front. So I can make good temporaries with copper bands that are not going to fall out, that are not going to rot, that could last quite a while. And I do that for a lot of patients, and I said, when you're ready to do the crown and bridge, you'll let me know, and then we'll do the definitive treatment.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tau. Hope everybody's having a wonderful day or evening when they're listening to this episode or watching on YouTube. I want to remind everybody to go check out my sponsors, both Dental Intelligence and the doc sites, for their continued support. It allows me to come to your inbox every single Friday at 5 a.m. Eastern Time with a new episode. I also want to remind everybody about my event called Supercharge Your Dental Practice. It's in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at Pier 66 Resort on September 27th and 28th. You can check out the website superchargeyourdentalpractice.com and register for the event and use the code RAVING, R-A-V-I-N-G, to save $100 on your registration. Got a great speaker lineup, so check it out. Hope to see you there. Today's episode is called Open Wide, Striving for Excellence in Your Dental Career. We're going to be talking about what trends that the guest thinks are having a major impact in the profession, what he thinks are important considerations for building a practice, why it's important to give back to the profession. Today's guest is Ed Feinberg. So Ed works with dentists who want to improve their crown and bridge work skills so they can become better treatment outcomes for their patients. He is a graduate of Tufts University Dental School and practiced dentistry in Scarsdale, New York for more than 40 years. Now practicing in Arizona, he is a successor to a unique tradition of restorative dentistry. He was trained by master and pioneer in full coverage restorative dentistry, Dr. Elliot Feinberg. The techniques used by Drs. Edward and Elliot have been documented in more than 100,000 photos taken during the last 70 years. Dr. Feinberg is currently a director of Onward, an online teaching organization for full coverage restorative dentistry. To date, he has created more than 35 online courses for the site. The site is also an extensive library of downloadable materials and a monthly blog. So please welcome to the Raving Patients Podcast, Dr. Ed Feinberg. Ed, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
I appreciate you joining me. I know we had some technical difficulties and hiccups getting you into the recording studio, but I'm glad we finally got that taken care of, and I'm excited to have you share your expertise with the audience. So can you talk about, the first thing I want you to talk about is kind of your unique career journey, and kind of how you built a practice in Scarsdale. You're now in Scottsdale, Arizona. But tell everybody about your career and kind of the trajectory of it.
Well, I grew up in dentistry. My father was a master and pioneer of full mouth reconstruction and crown and bridge dentistry, and I learned everything from him. And everything that I learned is completely different from what is being taught in dental schools. So I'm able to save a lot of teeth that most dentists want to extract. And my whole practice and vision of practice is completely different from the direction that I see happening in the profession right now. I spent a lot of years working under a very tough taskmaster and studying in order to build up my knowledge and skills. And I feel very strongly that is my obligation to give it back to others. And what's disturbing to me is that I don't see that many people who really understand the value of what crown and bridge can do for patients. And they're overly focused on implant therapy, when really, if you have all these skills in your armamentarium, you can pick and choose what's really best for each patient. What makes me unique is that my father started taking pictures in 1950. And what I really teach is basic principles, and not so much centered on techniques, but why you're doing what you're doing. I have 100,000 pictures, as you mentioned in the introduction, 70 years of documented cases with x-rays of patients for decades, follow-up, to show that the techniques are correct and have a real track record. And I see a lot of things being done that violate the basic principles that allowed my dad and I and my dad's teacher to have so much success. And I see a lot of people having trouble with Crown and Bridge, problems that were solved in the 1930s. And that's very upsetting. And then you watch the so-called advancements with new technology, and while some of it's good, some of it actually violates the basic principles and is really not an advancement, and most people don't know the difference. That's very sad. So it's my obligation to try to educate people and to show them where dentistry came from, what dentistry can do, and why a lot of people are having difficulties and are doing overly invasive treatments when simple Crown and Bridge most of the time will solve the problems and is the best treatment of all.
Got it. No, that's really interesting. And I know you said you practiced with your dad. As I mentioned on our brief introduction, I grew up in New York. My dad was a dentist in New City, New York. He practiced for 40 plus years, and unfortunately, I never got to work with him. He developed an osteogenic sarcoma when I was in actually an undergraduate school at Tulane, and had to sell his second office, which was located in New York City. His primary location was at my home in New City, the home I grew up in, and it wasn't big enough to have two people. So that kind of changed my career trajectory and sent me to a different place, and I ended up in Philadelphia, obviously. But so you got to work with your dad, which is great. He obviously taught you, and his teacher kind of passed down these techniques, these ways they did dentistry. That obviously over the years, I think technology has risen above some of the basic techniques that we learned, and teeth that you think are savable, nowadays we slick out and we put implants in. So can you talk about, I'm curious, one thing, you practiced in Scarsdale, I think you said for 40 years. I also went to Tufts Dental School, by the way, and so did my dad. So what made you transition from, I'm just curious, from Scarsdale, New York to Scottsdale, Arizona, other than a different lifestyle, but you're still practicing. So what made you make that change from New York to Scottsdale?
Well, I had a lot of things happen to me. I had to make a major change in my life because of things that happened. So the first thing that happened is everybody in my family passed away. My sister, who used to live here in Arizona, she passed away before my mother did. And when that happened, I sold my place and moved in with her because it was clear that she needed some help and I could help her without her realizing that I was helping her. And I did not expect her to pass away and that I didn't want to stay there. And at the same time, I sold my practice to a really nice guy who I like a lot, but he did not want to learn anything from me. And it was very uncomfortable for me to stay there, and I didn't want to stay there anymore. So between those two things, it was like death. If you don't get out of those life circumstances, you just stagnate. So I thought, well, if I'm going to move, maybe I should really move. So that's what I did, and I'm having a great time here in Arizona. I met a lot of wonderful people. I'm involved in the Dental Association here, and I'm practicing 1 day a week. But I'm really concentrating on my teaching website, which is I want to make sure that this material is passed down. I know there are good practitioners everywhere who would be interested in learning how to do really good Crown and Bridge with a real track record. And it's not just Crown and Bridge. I also talk about implants too. We started doing them in the early 80s. When they first came to this country. So I've seen everything with implants, and I know what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, because there are no real panaceas in dentistry. And the better you are, you know what works best in each situation. And I see less and less people, they're like one-trick ponies. All they know how to do is implants, and that is not the answer to most restorative problems. And I see people ending up with a hodgepodge instead of having treatment that actually solves their problems. I'll give you a perfect example of that. Nobody's disputing the fact that, let's say you have a patient with a perfect mouth and one tooth is missing. That is a perfect place for an implant because you don't have to touch the adjacent teeth. But when you go to the lectures, that is not what you see. you will see them putting implants, and among teeth where the teeth are falling apart, they have big fillings in them, they either have crowns or are going to need crowns. That doesn't make sense to put a single tooth implant which just fills a space and does nothing for the teeth around it. If you know how to do good bridge work, you can correct all the problems in an entire area. You can change the architecture, bring the forces down close to the bone. You can distribute the load by splinting the teeth so that each tooth doesn't have to carry the forces by itself. And then that's usually the end of the patient's problems. Whereas the piecemeal approach, sticking an implant wherever there's a space, and as teeth go, you keep putting more implants in, their patients' problems are never solved. So I don't think that's a good approach. I think it shows a lack of understanding of looking at a patient and wondering what's going to happen to this patient down the road and what can we do to prevent this patient from losing their teeth and having problems. And
I think what you're talking about is more comprehensive treatment planning rather than dealing with it problem after problem after problem and looking down the road to come up instead of having a hodgepodge of implants in different spaces. Like you said, when you lose a tooth, you stick an implant in. That's obviously not what's best for the patient. So is that am I on the right track there?
Yes, you're exactly encapsulated perfectly. That is why I call the single tooth implant the poster child for the piecemeal approach to dentistry.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So I know that you one of the speaking points you wanted to talk about. You said there are just some disturbing trends, and one of them obviously is what we just talked about, and the concern that they're not comprehensive treatment planning, but they're also taking a lot of teeth out that potentially could be saved long term. Okay, and look, I've seen it when I practiced, because I practiced for 23 years, a lot less than you did, and I don't practice anymore. But there were teeth that we said that would fail, and they were there years and years later. Obviously, there's a reason for that. So, are there any other disturbing trends that you're seeing in the profession that you think will impact the future?
Oh, absolutely, yes. The first really is attitudes of the younger practitioners, and some of it is not their fault. They are getting out of school with these huge debts, and when you get out of school, your skills are very rudimentary. I hear that people complaining today, even more so than when we went to dental school, about how they're so unprepared for practice. You need to concentrate on building your knowledge and skills. And that is, your education really begins the day you graduate. And at a time when they should be focused on that, all they can think about is, how am I going to pay these loans back? And if they're forced into a production mindset before they're ready, they're never going to like the profession, they're never going to be good at it, and they're never going to give anything back. And that's what's going on. A lot of the younger people feel that they know everything. And they know absolutely nothing. So I'll give you some stories because I've seen everything. So I've given a lot of presentations to residency programs, especially when I was in New York. And I spoke to one residency program in Brooklyn. And I said to the director, an hour isn't enough for me to show them anything, but I'd be willing to come on a Saturday at my own expense and spend the whole day with them and teach them how to do crown and bridge. Oh, he said, they would never come on their time, only on our time. What? I mean, when I was in my residency program, whatever they would tell us, we were there. We knew we were there to learn. We knew that whatever we were paid was a token salary so that we can continue our education. It wasn't a real salary. And whatever time of day or night they wanted us, we were going to learn something, we would be there. But this group of people doesn't see it that way. And so, they are prevented from learning anything when they have a closed mind. I was trained completely differently, so my perspective is very different from everyone else's. But I have the evidence on my side. I have 70 years of documented evidence for what I'm doing. And the best feeling in the world is when you have a patient come back year after year and you get to watch the work that you did last in health all those years, and that patient didn't have to do any dentistry in 40 years. Now, that doesn't happen to everybody, but a very high percentage, the cases lasted for decades, and I feel that if you don't get at least 10 years out of it, it's a failure. So that's such a high percentage of success. And there are definite basic principles as to why that worked, and they're being violated by what's being taught in the dental schools, which have become centers of indoctrination. And people are so intent on preserving that indoctrination that they're not open to any perspective that might be different. And I think that's a terrible thing for the profession. And then the technology follows that thinking. And that's not an advancement. I really believe that if we're really going to advance as a profession, anything new that comes down the pike must be compared to the standard of what came before. But today, people aren't so interested in health and longevity. They're interested in workflow and economics. And that's not good for patients. And so that's upsetting to me. That's going to ruin our reputation. We had one of the finest reputations of any profession, and I see that going down the drain if we don't turn this ship around.
Well, it's funny because I obviously help practices with online reviews and marketing and getting patients to be happy about their experiences and what to do if you don't get a good review. But if you look in the news, you read articles, you look at Facebook groups, everybody says, I'm looking for a dentist that isn't going to rip me off. I'm looking for a dentist that isn't going to try to take advantage of me. I'm looking for a dentist who will accept what my insurance pays. So we already have somewhat of a negative, and again, we used to be at the very, very top. Now we have somewhat of a negative problem in the industry, or not in the industry, but in the general public's eye, that all we're trying to do is take advantage of a patient when they come in for treatment on a tooth. And I think that is a problem long term for the industry, because they think every dentist is not trustworthy, almost like some lawyers are, or some ambulance chasers and stuff like that. So I definitely agree with you that is a potential problem down the road for the industry.
I'll add something to that, because, while I was trained in doing very sophisticated treatments, I also have treatments for patients who are not candidates for sophisticated dentistry. And I've helped a lot of people that other people would just turn away because they couldn't pay their entire fee right up front. So I can make good temporaries with copper bands that are not going to fall out, that are not going to rot, that could last quite a while. And I do that for a lot of patients. And I said, when you're ready to do the crown and bridge, you'll let me know, and then we'll do the definitive treatment. But in the meantime, I want that tooth there so that when you're ready to do it, you could actually do it. And so I do a lot of things like that for patients, where I charge them very little money and I get them out of their immediate problem. And I don't see too many people doing that. And I get just as much pleasure out of helping those patients as I do doing a big sophisticated case. And those people, we're, as human beings, we all go through cycles in our life. And some people going through a cycle where they're down and out. If you help somebody and that turns everything around for them, and now they're able to do the dentistry because they're in a better cycle, they're going to tell their friends and colleagues and send those patients to you because they know that you care and that you help them. So that's what I have to offer dentists. I have other treatment options for them that they never heard of, that they would never even occur to them, because my whole philosophical approach is completely different than what they were taught. So I try to help people, and I think that's, you hit the nail on the head. These people are being turned away unless they pay some exorbitant fee. And that's not really fair. I think if you help somebody, get them out of their immediate problem, help them to navigate socially until they're ready to do definitive treatment, you could keep them going. That's a good patient. And they're not getting the care that they need when they need it. And so I think that is a big problem. That's not how I was raised in dentistry.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I give you a lot of credit because, again, as you mentioned, we have these huge students have huge loans coming out. They have to, I don't want to say make a quick buck, but they have to obviously pay their loans back. School is exorbitantly priced, in my opinion. If I was going to school now and I had to take out loans, I'd have a second thought about going to dental school at this point with what some of the schools cost. It's insane. So let's talk about practice building, okay? What do you think are some important considerations for those looking to, they get out of school, they do residency, let's say, they're working as an associate, and then they have a choice of either doing a startup or buying a practice and growing it from there. Any thought process there? And again, what considerations do you think they should take into mind as they're considering building a practice?
Well, I think it's very important to have a mentor. I really would like to see practicing dentists who are experienced take a young person under their wing and teach them and show them how to do things. That's what I had. That was much more common when I graduated from dental school. Now, you know what I see happening? Because here in Arizona, I think we have the most numbers of DSOs of any state. But the two main specialists that I work with in New York, both sold their practices to DSOs. And I was very upset with them for doing that. It's like a sellout, in a way, because they didn't have to do that. But you know what their rationale was? Well, all these dentists are now in DSOs, and if I don't join, they're not going to send patients to me. And so what are we going to have in the future? Are we going to have anybody serving as mentors to put young professionals on the right track? I want to be somebody's mentor, and I can't even find anyone who wants one. Think about that. And I have a lot to give. I could change somebody's practice life overnight, and I want to do that, and I can't find young people who are interested. That's a sad thing. I don't know, if we don't turn that trend around, what kind of profession are we going to have? I never thought that would ever happen to me. When I started my career, people would have given their eye teeth to have someone like me show them how to do everything.
Interesting take on things, and I'm not going to disagree with you on that, but it's very interesting. I like how direct you are too. You're a New Yorker like me, so that's I appreciate that. So let's talk about how to make a difference in the profession and how can someone become the best leader. So can you give some thought processes there?
Well, we are leaders. You're not only the leader in your office, with your staff members, you want them to become better and better people and give them more responsibility and teach them to become the best that they can be. But also you want to be a leader in the community. So being on the third floor, nobody knows you're there. If you don't get out into the community, then nobody knows you. And Scarsdale was a very transient community. I got involved in the Rotary Club, in the BNI, in the Scarsdale Family Counseling, which was my favorite charity. I loved being involved in that. I loved it. That's how I met people. I got most of the village people, when I call them the village people, I mean like the mayor and the fire chief and all those people to be my patients because they knew me and they trusted me and they knew that I cared about the community and I cared about them. And that's how, and people get to know you. I got some of my best patients sitting at the diner counter for lunch. So like for example, I'm working with this lady and she thinks the best use of her time is to work through lunch on patients. Whereas I would go and sit at lunch and meet people, and the first thing they do is they ask you what you do, and my training in the BNI helped me develop my elevator speech so that I could tell them exactly what I do that separates me from everybody else. And people wanted to come to me right away because they knew that I was different and that I was special. Just from that, and that was fabulous training and absolutely worthwhile. And in the meantime, I got to meet all these people, and I got patients from that too. So I think that's better than putting blind advertisements and things, that kind of thing, where you're just another person, and people are only coming to you because of price. In fact, most of my patients were not from Scarsdale, believe it or not. They came from all over, and it doesn't matter where you are. I never thought that I was in competition with anyone else. In fact, there were other dentists in my building, and we all helped each other because we all had different clientele and different types of practices. And in fact, one of my colleagues was even in the Rotary Club with me, and we were really good friends, and we practiced in the same building. And I think that's important that you get out and meet people and be part of things. That's how you build a practice. And it isn't easy, let me tell you. I know it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. And there's no one magic bullet. You got to do a lot of different things for marketing. I did one cool thing, though, really cool, because everything I do was like different from what everybody else does. So one of the things I did, since you're from Philadelphia, I kind of met online this chiropractor from Philadelphia, and he created this service where they were going to introduce you to different types of practitioners in your area, and the introduction was primarily to meet and so that you could maybe develop a referral relationship with a practitioner. And there were chiropractors and plastic surgeons and practitioners like that, more alternative practitioners than mainstream practitioners. So I learned a lot from that. I was in different plastic surgeons' offices. I was in one office where they had 4 different types of lasers in their operating room. So I knew right away that that individual knew more about lasers than anybody else that I went to. So if I came across somebody who needed some laser plastic surgery, that's where I would send them. I met somebody who specialized in hand physical therapy. And as it turned out, my office manager needed physical therapy. And where do you think I sent her? And if I'd never met these people, I would never have known. Because helping people is not always about dentistry. It's about being able to send people and making sure they get the care that they need, whether it be dental or otherwise. Because you develop close relationships with your patients. And I got to meet the chiropractor for the Yankees, and he had a TV show, and I got to be on his TV show. And we did send each other patients. So it was, what was overwhelming was that I met so many people that it was impossible to establish relationships with all of them. So I picked a few, but it was really a novel thing to do, and I learned a lot from it. So I thought that was very, very worthwhile. So I did a lot of things like that. I did also advertising in the healthcare newspaper, which was different because the newspaper gave you 1 full page to write an article about anything you want and 1 full page of ads.
So advertorial.
I got to write all about different things in dentistry that I do and showcase what can be done for patients. And I thought that was a very valuable opportunity to help educate people. And I got patients from that. So I did a lot of these things for marketing. But my dad didn't have to do any marketing. He did one thing. He was brilliant. He gave courses in the office to dentists for 40 years. So we take like 12 dentists, and we would take a patient and show every step on a patient how to make a fixed bridge in 7 sessions with slide lecture 2. And then another 7 sessions, how to make a precision attachment case, which nobody knows anything about today. One of the finest cases in dentistry ever invented, and nobody will listen, which is sad, because it also works really well with implants, and is a great solution to a lot of restorative problems. In any case, in return, they would refer the patients that were beyond what they could do. And after my dad passed, things started to change. And that's when the implants really became very popular. And rather than sending patients, the dentists were keeping the patients and putting implants in all over the place, which is what they do now. And that's the trend that started. Because when they first came to this country in the early 80s, everyone was doing implants the way Dr. Brownemark said, who I got to meet, and he was a true scientist because he did 20 years of studies before they ever came to this country. And if you followed what he said, you knew you were going to get 85 to 90% success. And that was true, and that's what everybody did in the beginning. until, they started to do partial arches and single teeth in the 90s. And in the 2000s, they went nuts. And now it's like the Wild West of implant therapy. And it's overdone and it's too much.
Got it. Well, we're limited on time. We're running out, so I want to get through our, and that's really good information you provided. Like I said, I like how direct you are. So I'm going to read you some questions here, and the point of this is to answer them fairly quickly, not long drawn-out answers here. Okay, we'll never get the podcast done. So let's see. First question is, let's see, what do we got here? Let's see. Let's find one that I like. All right. How do you define success? What is your definition of success?
Well, to me, success isn't financial or financial alone. Yes, everybody wants to make money, but my direction has always been to make a difference, to do something that really makes things better. That's how I was raised. I feel that I was born into my family for a reason, and it's my responsibility to pass on what was given to me to other people. So to me, the more I can do that and the more successfully I can do that, that's what I think success is.
Perfect. When you were a kid, what was the first thing you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, I started working in the dental office when I was 16. And when you're a kid, you really don't know what you want to do. So my father was a genius. I watched him and I saw him do miracles. And so I was very impressed by that from a very early age. I knew he was special, and I knew I had this special opportunity to learn from a master. So
Okay.
I never considered anything else.
Okay. Much shorter answers. We can't go long here, Ed. Very short
Okay.
answers.
All right.
What book have you read multiple times?
I would say my own book.
Okay. What it's called? What? Open Wide?
It's called Open Wide. It's on Amazon. And now I think I could write a better one. That was my first attempt at a book of essays.
What profession do you think is the most undervalued today?
What profession? You mean within dentistry?
Nope. This is not. What profession in the world any profession that you think is undervalued? One profession.
I would say dentistry.
Okay. If you were to write about a book about yourself, what would you name it? Not an essay book, but a book about yourself. What would you name it?
I would say My Interesting Journey.
Okay. How did you distinguish yourself from your competitors when you were practicing?
Well, I never competed with them because I had techniques of saving teeth and doing things and options for patients that nobody else was doing.
Okay,
That I
good.
got from
That's
my
it.
dad.
Again, short, not long answers here. What have you given up on that you never wish you had? So something you gave up on that you never wish you had. One answer.
Gave up on. I can't think of anything like that.
So you've never given up on anything in your life.
I don't quit.
Okay.
If I'm going to do something, it's going to be the best I know how. I'm going to continue.
Okay, if you lost everything you had worked for tomorrow, what was the first step for you in starting over? So if you lost everything you worked for, what would be the first step in starting over?
Wow, that's a very hard question to answer. I'm not sure I know how to answer that. But no one can take your knowledge and skills away from you, so I have that that I could take with me anywhere.
Got it. If you could take a class on anything that you wanted to learn, what would it be? Not in dentistry. Life.
I would like to study. I studied martial arts for 15 years. I would like to do more of that.
Okay, perfect. Let's see what we got here. How do you capture and keep track of ideas? Do you keep a notebook? Do you do voice memos? How do you keep track of your ideas?
I have to write them down, and sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and write them down.
Got it. How many hours a week do you work on average?
I'm not doing very much on patients, working 1 day a week. That's it.
Got it.
But I'm spending a lot of time on my teaching website, on my blog, on writing my third book, which is a textbook. And
Okay. Has anybody been important in your network on your journey? Now, not your dad, someone else. So has anybody in your network been important to you on your journey?
I have been touched by many people. So there's no one individual, but a lot of people helped me.
Okay, 2 questions left. It's very easy answer. Do you have a hard time telling people no?
Sometimes.
That's not the right answer.
Sometimes.
It's either yes or no.
No, I don't have a hard time with it.
Okay. All right. Last question, and should be very easy. What is one subscription, either business or personal subscription, something you pay for on a monthly basis that you cannot live without?
I don't know how to answer that question.
So you don't pay for anything on a monthly basis?
Well, I do. I subscribe to a bunch of things, but I wouldn't say that I couldn't live without them.
Okay, well then we're good. So, all right. So, Ed, how can people reach out to you if they want information about how you can help their practice?
Well, I'm online. My teaching website is www.theonwardprogram.com. All my contact information is on the website, and everything about me is on the website. I'm very easy to find. I'm on Facebook. I'm on, Instagram and LinkedIn.
Okay,
And
so it's
I
just
would
under Ed Feinberg is what they're looking for, correct?
Correct.
Got it. And what were you going to say?
And I have 2 books on Amazon also.
Okay, one's called Open Wide. What's the other one called?
The other one is called The Double Tilt Precision Attachment Case for Natural Teeth and Implants, and it's a textbook on that subject.
Got it. Perfect. So, Ed, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, expertise, opinions with the audience on both on podcasting and the YouTube networks. Guys, if you like the episode, please like it, please review us, please share it with your colleagues. Let them know that Ed was on the Raving Patients podcast and you think they should take a listen. I want to thank both the sponsors, both the Doc Sites and Dental Intelligence, for their support. And I want to remind everybody about my event, Supercharge Your Dental Practice, which is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, September 27th and 28th. You can go to superchargeyourdentalpractice.com to find out more information about the amazing speakers that we have at the event. And as I end every single one of my episodes, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next time, thank you, Ed, for joining me, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thank you.